everyone, and thank you to my senior project TED Talk. The research question that I chose for my senior project is, what strategies can endurance athletes use to improve their mental strength in order to maintain their physical performance? And now I'm going to tell you a story about how I almost quit cycling twice. So, when I first learned how to ride, I was very young, like most kids, about this age, trying to ride in a jean skirt, and it didn't go very well. I got 10 feet out of the driveway, went face first into the pavement, and didn't want to ride again. My dad stood there in the driveway with his head in his hands, wondering what he was going to do about a daughter that couldn't ride a bike and couldn't play ball sports. He didn't want to be a gymnastics dad, and I don't blame him. And like I said before, I never wanted to ride again after this day. That was the first time I quit cycling. The second time came a few years later, but I'll get to that in a minute. About a year after I face planted, I got back on my bike and I tried it again. And this time it was more successful. I started racing mountain bikes in 6th grade when I was 12 years old, and I really loved training and I really loved racing and the feeling of success as I crossed the finish line, and it was just a really good feeling. It was easy for me, it was natural. Early that race season, I qualified for the mountain bike national championships, and that summer my parents and I decided to pack up the car and drive to Sun Valley, Idaho so I could compete. I ended up winning, to my surprise and my parents, who told me to just have fun and not worry about how I placed. So what they didn't know was that I was riding scared. I just did what I knew how to do, and I pedaled hard and I pedaled fast. The next couple of years through middle school were a little bit harder than my first year, as it now felt like there was a target on my back, and I started to think about the other opponents that I was racing against, and it was just harder. I had more pressure to do well because I had done well in the years prior, and I started to lose confidence a little bit. Despite the fact that my dad had always said that I was talented physically, and I was more talented than most kids my age, and most adults in fact. But I didn't want to listen to him when he said that my confidence was holding me back. I was the stubborn middle schooler, and I was like, no, I'm not going to listen to you, that's not my problem, so I'm just going to keep pedaling. It worked for freshman year. Once again, I had a really successful year racing. It was my first year of the Colorado High School League Series, and I petitioned up as a freshman to race in the junior varsity category against 70 other junior varsity girls. And I won that series overall championship. I also won the state championship that year. But once again, there was a target on my back, and I started slipping back and wanted to lose. Those next 2 years, during my sophomore and my junior year, were very challenging for me because I had lost more confidence than I'd ever thought possible, and I wasn't really sure why. I still kept trying to train and trying to race at the same way that I had in years prior, but I kept coming up short. My training felt lackluster, and my races were no longer races. They were more like rides. I wasn't putting in the same effort that I had beforehand, and it just didn't feel good to me anymore. By the end of my junior year, I was tired. I didn't want to race. I didn't want to ride my bike. And I wasn't sure why this was. This was the second time I almost quit cycling. Now, if you're wondering how this relates to my project, this is how I came to decide on my research question. Originally last semester, when we were coming up with our research questions, I had a completely different topic, and it was nowhere related to cycling or mental strength or anything like that. And the more effort and thought I tried to put into it, it wasn't working, and I couldn't come up with a solid project or a solid thesis. So I decided that I should change my project to something that I have devoted most of my life to doing, cycling and mental strength, as that is something that I have struggled with. So that is how I got to this topic, because it made sense and it related to me. I also wanted to do this topic because most people don't understand that athletic ability is so closely tied to mental strength. People don't realize that mental strength is what sets apart a good athlete from a great athlete. And this is something that I also didn't understand until after my junior year of riding. After my junior year of the high school league, I started attending a sports psychologist, as I wasn't quite ready to quit cycling, even though I thought I was. So I started attending a sports psychologist, and I quickly started to understand the different methods that there were for me to use in order to improve my mental strength, and so that I could find out once again why I loved riding my bike. And now I'm going to go into some of these methods that I learned through the help of my sports psychologist and through research. These are methods that help me get back in the saddle. The first one is self-talk. Who here talks to themselves when they're exercising? So most of you. Don't worry, you're not crazy. It's proven. It works. So self-talk is what it sounds like. It's when the athlete talks to themselves during exercise or during competition in order to build their confidence and to perform better. And in the study, Inner Sports of Behavioral Regulation, they talk about the two different perspectives of mental strength and of self-talk and how each one relates to mental strength. The first one is the first-person perspective. So that would be as if I was talking to myself using the I perspective. So an example of that would be, I need to pedal faster, I need to pass this girl, I need to get to the finish line quicker. The second one is the second-person perspective, which is when the athlete uses you statements in order to talk to themselves. So this would be, you need to go faster, you need to pedal harder, you need to reach the finish line. And according to the study, the second-person perspective is actually more effective, as it is like a coach is giving the athlete praise. It is, it's coming from an external source, so the athlete is thinking about, it's almost as if the athlete is trying to impress somebody else, which causes them to go faster. For me, this was a huge step in understanding that this isn't actually an effective method that I could use, as I'd always talked to myself, but I didn't realize that the way that I talked to myself was negative. I used more of the I need to do something and less of the you're okay, you're pushing hard, you're gonna make it. And so once I understood that that was the way that I needed to go, my racing game changed. The next one that I will be talking to you about is mental imagery. So mental imagery is also what it sounds like. It's when the athlete imagines themselves doing the task at hand and imagines what they want to have happen. So like self-talk, there are two different perspectives. There is the internal perspective and the external perspective. An example of the internal perspective would be as if I'm riding my bike and I'm imagining myself on my bike. So I'm seeing my hands on the handlebars, I'm seeing the trail ahead of me, I'm envisioning where I want to go and the lines that I want to take. The external perspective is again like the coach's view. So it's an external view of the athlete doing the task. So it would be as if I am standing on the side of the trail and I'm watching myself ride down the trail and see what lines I'm choosing, what obstacles I'm going around, and that sort of thing. And contrary to self-talk, the internal perspective is more effective for this method because the athlete is able to focus on what they need to be looking at, and they're not thinking about what somebody else is seeing. For me, I relate to this because it's very similar to the phrase that most mountain bikers use, which is, look where you want to go. This is a very popular Devo term. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Devo, but in the program Durango Devo, we talk a lot about look where you want to go, look where you're on a ride. Because if you look at the trail and you're looking at the obstacles and the trail ahead of you, your bike will follow where your eyes go. And I was able to translate this into my racing by very similar to, I would imagine myself, if I imagine myself being successful in my race, then I would be successful and I would end up being more successful in my ride. The next one that I will be talking about is settling in. Settling in is a little bit more of a tricky term because it doesn't seem like it is psychological, and this is something that I learned that it was actually psychological. So settling in is when the athlete learns, how to temper their effort and temper how fast they're going so that they don't blow up too early in the race or too early in the competition. And this, for me, this is very groundbreaking because I always had the mental issue of if I started a race and I was with a group of girls that even if I had raced against them a ton of times and they did the same thing, I would still be worried that if they were going harder on the start and I wasn't able to match that, I was never going to keep up with them for the rest of the race. There was no way that I would be able to pass them later, and there was no way that I would have a good result. But I realized, and the more that I would start to settle in on races, I came to understand that not only when I settle in, not only when I would settle in after a start would I be able to pass more people, but then I would also feel mentally better about my race, and I would have a stronger finish. The last method that I'm going to be talking about today is environmental support and social support. These two are a little bit more tricky, but they make a lot of sense. So environmental support is when the athlete feels comfortable in the environment no matter where they are. Most professional athletes, they take a lot of time traveling and they spend most of their time away from home. So if they are able to create a routine and get some of the same things that they have at home, then they have a better chance of not feeling as uncomfortable when they are in this race situation, and they are able to focus solely on the task at hand and not at the fact that they are maybe not getting as much sleep as they want to, or maybe don't have the same type of food that they want. And this makes the athlete more calm and more stress-free going into the race. Social support is also very similar, but it has to do with people. So if the athlete is traveling with, say, their family or their teammates or their coach, and they always feel like they have a very strong supportive group around them who is able to do things for them when they need it, then the athlete is also more calm. For me, this was the biggest piece in my self-confidence and my confidence in racing. And I also didn't realize it. As I didn't realize that the people that I always have around me and that I would always have either with me in training rides or at races were actually more harmful to my confidence than they were good. I always felt like I was having to impress these people and felt like I needed to make the effort that they were putting into me worth it. So because of that, I would freak out a little bit and I'd blow up and I just wouldn't do well. But after talking with my psychologist, I realized that I realized that I don't need to necessarily impress these people, because if I focus on what I am doing and I focus on the task at hand, then afterwards I will in fact end up impressing them. So now we're going to do a little activity where you guys are going to create your own mantras for self-talk. So think of an activity that you all maybe do, whether it be it could be athletic, it could also be academic, maybe it could be for the TED Talk. And so think of a situation, and now think of a way that you would maybe talk to yourself through the situation. And think about whether or not you're doing it in the I perspective or the you perspective. Now for me, the mantra that I just came up with is in relation to an upcoming race that I have here in a couple weeks. And it is a road race, so I'm not very familiar with road races, so it's very different, very different scene from the mountain bike race scene, and so it's going to be a lot more challenging for me. So the one that I have come up with is, you're okay, you're going to do great, just pedal hard. You're okay, you're going to do great, just pedal hard. So I hope that was maybe helpful for any of you guys. I don't know what you guys have coming up, but keep those in mind for some obstacle that you have in the future. As I have stated here in my TED Talk, I wanted to outline the methods that people are able to use in order to improve their mental strength, as I don't want anybody to feel the way that I did about the sport that I loved and the thing that I love doing. As I have also outlined, performance is not only just about ability and talents, but it is just as much of a head game as it is about physical talent. What is going on in your head is what sets you apart from everybody else. Thank you.
All right, we're going to open it up. Questions from the panel. Audience members, you are also welcome to ask her questions. So if you have a question about her research or her conclusions, feel free to raise your hand and she'll call on you.
I was wondering if there was a difference between talking to yourself in the I form or the U form that could be more positive or negative, or is it more of like a negative versus positive connotation of them? That doesn't make any sense. The connotation
Could you
versus-
clarify your
kind
question?
of. Like, I think like what you're trying to say is like, is one form, like, is it the way you're saying it? that's
Is
more-
one form, will one form make you more physically active and help
Yeah.
you achieve something better? Or?
Actually, yes. So in the study that I referenced for my self-talk, they did EMG, so it's like electromyography test. So it's like they test the muscle movements, like in relation to like what you think. So in this study, it was actually really cool because they said that people that talk to themselves in the U form, whether it be like in their head or like actually out loud, even if they weren't doing anything, but they were just talking themselves through it and talking themselves up, there was more like physical buildup. And so they were actually able to perform better. So like if an athlete had to lift something really heavy, if they were talking themselves up, they were able to actually lift it and it didn't feel as heavy. And that didn't occur in the I form. Okay.
So that's evidence that it works.
Mm-hmm.
Did any of your studies explain why it works? Any of the mechanisms that lead to these improving performance?
What I saw most commonly with the U form is that it's like an external praise. So it's like, because everybody wants to hear praise from like a coach or a family member or a friend or something. And so that was most directly linked with the U form, and that was the reason as to why people seem to perform better with the U form, because it felt like an external praise even though they were talking to themselves.
How common is this stuff? Like, is this super widespread? Is this just starting to sort of be common in terms of training for athletics? Like, how widely known are these techniques and how widely used are they?
From my research, not that widely known. It's still a pretty huge like misconception that like mental strength doesn't play as much, and it's definitely not publicized as much. But through my research, you can see that it's definitely starting to make a bigger impact and a bigger presence, but it's still definitely not on the forefront just yet.
Have you seen any examples of like, I guess, professional athletes that have psychologists that do better in like the Olympics or their certain sport than athletes that don't have these kinds of like support groups or places to go to have better mental strength?
I talked with Todd Wells. He's a local professional mountain biker, and he's also a 3-time Olympian. And during my interview, I talked with him a lot about these type of methods, and he said that for him, he performs better if he has the right environment around him and if he had the social groups. It wasn't so much for him about the self-talk and the mental imagery and that sort of stuff. It was more about the environment and how he felt before and after the race. So kind of the build-up and then like the cleanup process, say if he didn't do as well, that was more effective for him in his performance. Here?
So you mentioned, you talk about using you as an external praise. What about using you as in like you can do better, you can go harder? That's not as praising, that's a little more negative. Does it give the same results, or did you not look into
I'm not
that?
actually sure about that, but I'm sure it can go either way.
What further research do you think needs to be done in this field to sort of further this kind of knowledge to make it more useful to athletes, that kind of thing?
I'd like to see more information not in the sport and not in like the endurance athlete sector. Most of my research that I found was just on endurance athletes and like ultra marathon runners or like marathon cyclists, that sort of thing. And I couldn't find a lot of information just on general sports like soccer or football. But I think that'd be good research to do to see where it correlates there and if it's as effective in more mainstream sports as it is in these super long endurance activities. activities. Grandma?
This is Grandma. I'm interested in this because I have a grandson in Ohio that's a Division I tennis player in college.
Mhm.
He's a junior, and this is very familiar because I've been there Christmas talk to his parents, and this is very much what you're speaking of, that they were telling us about their son and what he's doing to perform mental, all of it. So I relate in that respect in another subject.
Thank you, Grandma.
Because I've heard it from the other side, so it's interesting for my generation to hear all this. So,
Thank you, Grandma. Mom.
Can you give me a list? If I want to go run a marathon, can you give me a list of 3 things I need to do based on what you're 3 things I can remember to do well and finish?
I would say the 3 would be to start off, like that morning when you're getting ready, starting off envisioning yourself doing well. And envisioning like at certain parts of the race how you want to be feeling, or like even like when you want to eat or when you want to drink. So envisioning yourself throughout the race, and that'll just start kind of getting your mental strength going and bringing up your confidence. And then during the race, obviously talking to yourself, because there will be low points. So if you're able to talk yourself kind of up a little bit during those low points, and then settling in. Just because if you're doing something like a half marathon or a marathon, they're long. And if you don't feel good while you're running, then it's going to make the experience that much worse. So trying to settle in as early as possible to make it that much more enjoyable. Yeah.
I mean, what you're describing sounds kind of ritualistic, right? And I'm wondering if you found anything about kind of what, I'm just thinking in terms also of some other things we heard yesterday involving like the way changing your perspective on things shifts the way your brain's functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And did you come across anything that either, I guess it's 2 questions, A, looked at like the ritualistic nature of the way we perform, and second, if there are any cognitive impacts that have been found from this?
I didn't, well, for the ritualistic part, there's like a strong piece about routines, which is kind of like what I outlined there. So forming routines, even though it sounds like a routine can kind of be rigid and even like negative if something doesn't go to routine, but if you're able to create like a general routine of how you want, like say your morning before a race to go, or like when you want to eat or drink or something during your race, that's super beneficial, but I didn't find a lot of cognitive
So that seems like,
pieces.
at least anecdotally, and certainly one of your points was that finding those ways to have kind of a comfortable sequence of events is important, but you're not sure why that is, just that it's helping. Is that
Yeah, in the studies they went more into the physical benefits and not necessarily the cognitive.
Okay.
Great. I think that's actually all the time we have for questions. So Camryn, if you will step out of the room.